Welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This is music by Kenny Young for Astro's Playroom, which came pre-installed on all PlayStation 5 consoles. It's a platformer used to kind of show off the capabilities of the new controller that comes with the PlayStation 5. Back in 2018, Kenny scored Astrobot Rescue Mission, which was made for PlayStation VR, so you'll hear music from that game as well during the discussion that I had with Kenny. Here he is.
It is very cool to get the opportunity to do another Astrobot game, but the ridiculous thing about Astro's Playroom is that it's pre-installed on every single PlayStation 5. So, you know, whether you like it or not, if you get a PlayStation 5, then you get this game for free. And the idea behind it, I mean, unfortunately, it's not just a vehicle for my music. Sony were thinking bigger than that. And primarily it serves the purpose of showing off the new DualSense controller, which is, you know, very familiar to people who are used to PlayStation or game console controllers in general, but it has a couple of cool new features in it, namely the haptics, which is like HD rumble.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're not allowed to say the R word because that's like old technology, but the reality is that it's a super high fidelity tactile feedback that you feel in the controller.
Yeah.
And it's not rumble because it operates actually at audio frequencies, so it's super high resolution. And that might sound a bit like whatever, but there's just really cool synesthesia that happens when you are hearing sound and feeling it at the same time.
Yes.
So that's super cool. And then the other feature is the adaptive triggers, which is the shoulder triggers that are on the controller. When you press them, it's not just a clicky button.
Yeah.
They have these adjustable amounts of resistance in it, and it's adjustable across the kind of the whole carry of the button. So you can make it feel like a click, or you can make it feel like it increases in tension as you pull it, like if you're pulling on a bow for a bow and arrow. And there's all these kind of cool little things you can do with it. And Astro's Playroom was put together to really showcase that and does a brilliant job of it. And when PS5 first came out, in particular, people were blown away by the DualSense controller and Astro's Playroom, because it really just does a great job of showing it off. And if you mentioned Astrobot, and of course we worked on the Astrobot Rescue Mission for PlayStation VR, and what's great about that game is it obviously really showed off some novel first-person platforming game mechanics in VR, and they did it better than I think anyone had done it up to that point. And that's something that the team Asobi at Sony Japan Studio are really great at doing, is taking new technology, prototyping ideas, and then turning it into an experience. And so that's what they did with Astrobot Rescue Mission, and with Astro's Playroom, they did the same process, but for the DualSense controller, and just tried out all these different crazy ideas, and then packaged up in this really cool little experience, which, I had the pleasure of scoring for them.
So talk to me a little bit about writing the music, because some of these themes are from the Rescue Mission as well, and kind of carried through. And
so, I mean, the general premise for Astro's Playroom is that it all takes place inside the PlayStation 5. I guess inside your PlayStation 5, so it's this kind of very meta experience. And you are sort of drawn into that world via the DualSense controller. And then there's the main sort of area in the games called the CPU Plaza, and it's got its own vibe. And then from there, you can go into the 4 different areas of the game, which are the GPU Jungle, the Cooling Springs, the SSD Speedway, and the Memory Maze. So they're all themed after a different, significant component of the PlayStation. So it's quite techie and nerdy, but it's all, like you're saying, Astro's really cute, and the presentation and style of the whole thing's very cute.
Yeah.
And each area has its own, obviously, conceptual identity, but then the music sort of backs that up. And so when you start the game, the menu music will sound kind of familiar to people. It's like a remix I've done based on I Am Astrobot. Which was kind of like the theme tune, if you like, for the Astrobot rescue mission. So I've kind of taken some of the new themes from Playroom and worked that into that. And then in the CPU Plaza, it's got a very kind of electro disco kind of vibe, and it's meant to sound a little bit clubby. It's actually got, in the game, not so much on the soundtrack album, there's a quite strong room acoustic on it to make it sound like you're in a club. And the idea is like all the little robots are, you know, having a little party inside your PlayStation 5. And this is the kind of music that they listen to. Yeah, I think for that, it was how to make that sort of fun, but with a hint of like slightly more serious club. Not that I can do serious, but what was weird about that one is that track was actually kind of a cast off from one of my attempts to write music for the GPU jungle area. And that level, that was actually the first area of the game I tackled.
The GPU part?
The GPU jungle. Yeah, and there's various things I tried there. There's actually, I wrote a piece for the PlayStation blog. I'm not sure if you've seen it, where there's I sort of put various clips together of early versions of the different tracks I was working on, and there's like SoundCloud clips that you can listen to for the like work in progress stuff. And that was kind of brave of me to put work in progress stuff up there for people to listen to, but people responded really well to it, and it is fun to listen to these early versions. But one of them is basically because the first version I did was a little bit too kind of predictable and a bit too childish. It was very much like what you might expect from a classic VGM level set in the jungle. So there was like panpipes and and you know, percussion, and it was very much that kind of school of thought. But they were like, nah. And it's maybe a bit too childish. So then asked me to do something a bit more kind of contemporary. And that's when I created this CPU Plaza theme accidentally, trying to go the other way and create something that had a slightly more serious edge. But they felt that was too serious. But they said they really liked it and they thought it might fit the CPU Plaza. And I hadn't seen that era yet because it didn't exist. So I just sort of shelved that and be like, okay. And we came back to it. And it totally worked. It was a good call. So it's nice when you create something that is good but not right, but then it just so happens to be right for something else, and you can keep it. And then it was back to the grind on the GPU jungle track, and because I'd sort of tried a couple of different things and failed, I was then sort of at a bit of a loss and pulled out this idea I'd been sort of playing with but hadn't shared with the team yet because it wasn't quite working. But it was backed into a corner a little bit and just thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. Might as well try that crazy idea that I've been toying with but not quite tried to really tackle it yet, which was to write a song. And so that was the basis of the GPU jungle track, and thinking about how it wasn't just like crowbarring an idea into the project. I originally was thinking about, knowing that it was about PlayStation 5 and like representing PlayStation 5, I was thinking, before I even started working on the project, I was thinking about ways of, how do you do that musically, using voice to, like, if you kind of think of it as like representing the spirit of the PlayStation 5, so that the PlayStation 5 was literally singing to the player, was one idea that I had. And that didn't transpire because it was there wasn't a good place to do that. But in the GPU jungle, we'd spoken about having a little character in the level, and it didn't exist at the point I was writing the music, but it was something that we'd spoken about doing. And so I thought, well, hey, let's make them sing. And So I wrote this song, which is kind of like a love letter from the GPU to the player. Or at least that's how it's kind of interpreted by most people, because that's what it feels like in context. I think the original inspiration was actually that it was like unrequited love between the GPU and the CPU. Because the CPU is like the one that tells everything in a computer what to do, because it's, this is central processing unit. So everything is at the behest of the CPU and gets its tasks farmed out. And so the GPU is kind of like the CPU's slave, basically. So that's the whole thing, which was like, everything I do, well, I can't even remember the lyrics now. But basically, it's got. I was going to say everything I do it for you. That's Bryan Adams.
That's Bryan Adams. That's like Robin Hood.
That's not what I wrote. How does it go? It's got something like that. It's basically that, but not enough to get sued. So the idea was that it's the GPU saying, I do it all for you. And it was them basically saying, I do it all for the CPU. But actually, the way it feels to the player is that the GPU is singing to them, partly because that's the character they can see.
Yes.
And I think, even if that wasn't like totally my like original intention for the song, it's a really nice interpretation, which kind of works better. And what's nice about it is it creates this like emotional connection for players between their hardware and them, which is cool, because the other side to Astro's Playroom is that there's an awful lot of PlayStation history in there, and what the stuff that you collect is like old bits of PlayStation hardware going right back to the actual consoles themselves. So you collect the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the end of these 4 areas in the game. But all the smaller collectibles are all like the peripherals and accessories for the consoles, and a lot of the classic games and game franchises and stuff. So
and characters and all that,
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's a lot of fan service, and it's very much aimed at PlayStation fans. But I think what it really showed a lot of people is that they didn't really realize quite how much affection that they had for their PlayStations and PlayStation hardware and stuff, especially if something that was maybe part of your childhood. Because PlayStation's been around for, over 25 years now. So,
amazing.
Even people of significant age will like, be looking at this stuff and be like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember that. That's really cool, and get a little bit emotional about it. So that's also kind of what makes having a love song in a platforming game kind of permissible, is that emotional edge to it is actually part of the experience.
Yeah.
So it felt fitting. But then just the fact that the song is working on multiple levels is also what makes it work. Because if it was just like a shopping list of graphics processing terminology, it would just be like only for the nerds.
Yeah.
And I made an effort when I was writing it to like use terminology that would be like accurate. It's not just using little buzzwords that I picked up from working in industry. It actually uses them in a context that is accurate. Because I was thinking about all the graphics programmers I've worked with and wanted them to, at least not be like messaging me or being like, oh, that song's cool, but you got this wrong. Which is exactly what you can expect from the kind of person who like is a graphics programmer. Because, you've got to be quite particular to get graphics hardware to behave. So they're also, it's just a personality trait. I can't do this to myself. So, I made an effort, and the fact that it's, it is techie, but also emotional, it just means it's operating on multiple levels and makes it kind of unique and a bit cool. And that is, out of all the music in the game, that is the one which people have really strongly responded to the most. And I think because of that, that emotional connection and the fact that it is a song, and so it's got that human kind of connection as well. Not just the power of music, but the power of emotional manipulation that you get from songs. And it was just a really unique opportunity to do that. And what allowed that was creative director Nicholas Doucet in this project also said right before I started working on it, was basically if there's one project we work on together where you get to do something a little bit off the wall, this is it, because it's coming pre-installed on PlayStation 5. So people's expectations aren't necessarily going to be all that high for this experience because they've not paid for it. They're getting it for free. So we want, which is great because it means when they check it out, if we can really impress them, then they're really going to love it.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, because they haven't paid for it, if you do something a little bit different, it's okay to take a little bit of a gamble on that. And so this was the place where we just tried something a little bit different and took a gamble. And it's just really nice to have that kind of rewarded. It wasn't just like something crazy we did that everyone was like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. That was a terrible idea. It's like, no, this is actually one of the things that makes this experience really special. And so there's a lesson to be learned from that in a way where, you know, hopefully as long as you've got the experience in mind and you're not just doing random cool stuff, but actually stuff that really backs up the experience and makes it stronger, then those are exactly the kind of places that you should be taking risks on. And so, it's nice to be working with people who are like supportive of that and encouraging of that. Because I mean, I don't know if I would have done this or dared to do that if I hadn't had that kind of advice and direction right up front.
I mean, I loved all the vocals in it in general, and you know, there's choir in there, and I think just in one or two tracks, and I kind of assumed that's sampled, but I also assumed that the rest of it was you. So how did all the vocal stuff play out? Yeah,
so I mean, a lot. I mean, and again, I should probably just mention Astrobot Rescue Mission again, because that's where so many of so much of this aesthetic was sort of established.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was doing on that was playing around with robotic vocalizations as just like a thing. And on this project, thinking about how can we take that further, then, you know, writing a full-on song with that robotic sound using the vocoder was, you know, again, came out of that way of thinking of how can we push that. But on all the other stuff, it's mainly, and it is me singing on I'm Your GPU, but obviously it's vocoded. So, and also I guess it's like it's a transatlantic kind of accent. And again, on that PlayStation blog article, I can send you all the little clips from that if you want to cut any of that into this. But I don't really know who or what I sound like in my, because there's the non-vocoded version is on there as well. Look at the light, it falls just right. My shadows they please beneath the trees, but none of these things happen for free. I don't know, I think it's somewhere a little bit between David Bowie and Bono. Or in my head, at least, that's what I think. I don't know. I'm not saying I sound like that. I think that's what I was trying to channel.
Okay.
Because, like, if it was just me singing Proclaimer style in my Scottish accent, it would be slightly too flavorful, probably for PlayStation 5 hardware. So it's got a little bit of a transatlantic twang to it. I do it for you. I'm your GPU. 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 Tell me what to do, and I'll do it for you. GPU. But the rest of it's all synthetic speech. For the most part, I'm using sort of singing text-to-speech little application that I use, which is called Chip Speech by a company called Plog. I think they're a French-Canadian company. And yeah, it's like any of the tracks, like in the SSD track, when you hear the little SSD
yes
vocal hook that comes in there, that's that, sort of singing text-to-speech. And you find that on all the other tracks too, in various places. And for the most part, I think because we'd had the full-on song in I'm Your GPU and the GPU jungle level, we didn't want there to be a song in every level.
Right.
So we just, having the little robot vocalizations is a nice way of keeping that idea consistently across the different areas, but not having it be too in your face. Because there wasn't really a justification for song in the other areas. I can't say I was really looking for an opportunity to write songs in other areas, so I didn't really try. But we just felt that, we'd done that, we'd had our little gamble on that, and then the other areas we should keep it a bit more pared back and simple. But it's interesting because like the SSD track's another sort of fan favorite after the I'm Your GPU track. It's the other track that a lot of people will say, oh, I love that, that's my favorite track in the game type stuff.
Yep.
And that little SSD refrain, it only happens like 3 or 4 times on the soundtrack album as you listen to it, but it's just so simple that it does also get stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And again, that's just another sort of lesson learned there. There's various different ways to make a track stand out, and simplicity is often, just as effective as something that's much more complex. And again, that track was fun because the SSD track was fun because of the synthwave 80s aesthetic, which, as a child of the 80s is a real a pleasure to just sort of go there and channel those sounds. And that one was one of the easiest ones for me to write, I think. And then the Cooling Springs track that originally started out as, I was actually trying to do something that was a bit like Sega Blue Sky, which is, for hardcore VGM fans, they'll know what that means, but it's like a particular era of music that you encounter in Sega games, particularly once they had sort of CD quality audio in there. And, this was all the in-house Sega musicians writing this stuff. And I think that's partly just because like the way that level looks, it's got this kind of beach party vibe, which is it's very Sega, basically. Which is kind of cheeky in like a Sony a Sony product. But again, it's just one of those like kind of game archetypes now. And I was listening to some of that music just to see if I could get a bit of that vibe. And the truth is I couldn't. Like, I just couldn't write music that was in that vein. Because it is, like, it is actually super, like, not that I'm scared of cheese, because, like, my music is, like, pure cheese. But having those, like, soaring, like, guitar lines and stuff, it's just, I don't think I've got the jazz chops to really go down that route and pull it off. So I was, but the one thing that track sort of retains from that kind of original music I was trying to write for that was, I think, the song structure, because it is, most of my stuff's like really super basic, like binary form, like A, B, A, B. If, you might get a little bridge if you're, if you're lucky. But for this one, because I was listening to that music, I was doing a bit of analysis and thinking about how they structured their music. It was quite often a little bit more sophisticated than that. And so that track, I mean, it's not like super crazy, right? It's not avant-garde, but it's, like there's 3 parts to it, and that's not something I'd really done before. And so, that was fun for me in terms of like if you like a musical analysis, and then reapplying those lessons learned, even though it's like this kind of party Ibiza kind of direction is kind of where I ended up taking it, it's still got a little hint of the Sega Blue Sky DNA in there in terms of the song structure. So that's cool. That's not something I've spoken about before because it's not the kind of thing you can talk about when doing general PR for the game or the soundtrack because it's just too specific. But I think for your audience, hopefully that's something which they'll appreciate.
Because there is electric guitar in there, was that you playing or was that sampled too?
You mean like some of the funk guitar and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the menu, it's a mixture. Like
okay.
I think any of the rhythm funk stuff is samples. The lead stuff is me. Like the one track that's almost taken wholesale from Astrobot Rescue Mission is the Follow Me Into the Storm track. That's very much the same as it was on Astrobot Rescue Mission, and that's got the sort of lead guitar part in it, which is me. In terms of other instruments, I was playing, again, lots of bass guitar in here is me, like on the GPU Jungle track. I'm Your GPU Song, I should say.
Yeah.
A bit of ukulele in the Bot Die Beach track, and ocarina in there as well.
Loved that, by the way. I loved that touch.
Funny one because it's one of those things where I just don't know if I did the right thing or not, where that ocarina bit doesn't come in until a good few minutes into that track. So anyone who's blasting through the game and doesn't explore the beach area in the Cooling Springs won't hear that. They just, they'll just be like, whatever, and they'll just, if they're not trying to collect everything and they're just kind of steaming through, they won't hear it. But anyone who is on that beach and looking in every nook and cranny to see what they can find, they'll eventually hear that, and it gives the level a little boost and some new interest. And it's difficult to know when you make these decisions if you're doing the right thing. But I enjoyed because I'm not a virtuoso ocarina player, but I've got two or three of them, and it just so happened. Like one of them happened to be in the same key as,
nice.
as the music. And if it hadn't been, I'm pretty sure I would have put it down pretty quickly. But because I was like playing along with it and just sort of jamming, and I was like, oh, that could work. And then before you know it, you've worked out a little part. Then and that normally just takes like an hour or two of messing around just to sort of come up with something. And those are the funnest moments, because that stuff doesn't feel like work when you are kind of improvising and just seeing what happens, because it's just eventually something clicks and then you can sort of refine it and hone it. And that's so much more preferable to when you're banging your head against a wall trying to like come up with a melody or a hook or whatever. And when it just sort of happens for free. And the universe you're just kind of jamming basically, and it just comes out. That's that's nice. And that's definitely an example of that.
That touch is something like, I feel like I've spent a lot of time with your music over the years, and I can hear you when I hear, and that was a perfect example of that. I'm like, that is so Kenny to have that beautiful...
that thing right there.
It was just like this beautiful little detail toward the end of the track, and I loved it. You mentioned a while ago now about how you remixed I Am Astrobot, and I love the remix for a lot of reasons, but it's fun how it's just like kind of a chill, slower version of I Am Astrobot. So talk to me about that choice.
I mean, to be honest, it was the I Am Astrobot track originally. So it's kind of based on Follow Me Into the Storm. It's the same melody, but it's like a sped up version of that. So it started out as a slower track that became sped up. And the reason it was sped up is that track was written for the original announcement trailer for Astrobot Rescue Mission. So it needed more energy. Basically, it's always nice when you're making a trailer or a video for a game to use music from the game. It's not always possible because the game music and trailer music are two quite different scenarios. And even though the Astrobot games are platforming games, and those are typically, quite high energy and quite full on and in your face music, like there's still not enough energy for a trailer. The only tracks that tend to have that much energy would be like the boss fight tracks, but those are too aggressive for a trailer, which is trying to showcase, this cute little characters and stuff. So, there's just not any music from the game that completely fits that trailer scenario. So, so I Am Astrobot was created for that. And it was a similar sort of thing, I think, for Astro's Playroom, whereby when we wanted music for the announced trailer, we were like, well, what are we going to use? We don't just want to use I Am Astrobot from the last game because this is a different game. So I think I'd already been playing around with some ideas for the menu, which is like a different version of the new remix of I Am Astrobot. And so I'd already done some stuff for it, just to sort of experiment and see how I could use some of the themes from Playroom in that context, and had slowed it down a bit again. And I can't remember why I did that, but it was probably just to get one of the themes to fit, because there's also a restriction when you've got a theme. It's written with a certain tempo in mind, and if you speed it up or slow it down, it ends up being just wrong. Like, it's just like you just wouldn't have written it that way if it was at that tempo, because it's just like, the phrasing feels off. And so I think that's the reason why I'd slowed it down, was like I'd probably just literally taken something, copied it and pasted it in and been like, okay, so that doesn't work. But I want to work with this theme, so I'm just going to have to split the difference and slow it down to a point where it feels like it still works as a theme, but also can maybe work with some of these elements from I Am Astrobot. So it was a bit of a mashup in that way, and then it was tweaked until it worked. For Astrobot Rescue Mission, I'm Astrobot really felt like it was the theme tune in many respects, just because in that announcement trailer, people just really kind of became attached to it and really liked the music. We're like, this is great. Oh, they're saying I am Astrobot in the music, and even though that's super cheesy. People just love that stuff because there's not many IPs where you can get away with doing that.
Yeah.
But it's actually a really effective IP building technique if you can get away with it. And yeah, Astrobot is one of those IPs that lends itself to just like saying the name of the game in the branding, and it because like robots, you know, the way they're cute, but also they're slightly stupid. They're not like super advanced intelligence. There's a simplicity and naivety which is kind of childlike to them.
Yeah.
So that's an aesthetic which, again, in the music allows it to be a little bit childlike. So you can do some of this simplistic stuff in a justifiable way. And that really took off for the first game that I worked on. And then for this one, yeah, it was just building on that. But I don't think it feels like the theme tune as much as it did in the last game. It's just sort of reworked a little bit and spiced up to fit the new project.
Tell me about Uplifting Little Number.
So, this is a recurring thing now on Astrobot Rescue Mission. There was a bit of music, first bit of music I wrote for what would then become Follow Me Into the Storm, which kind of, that melody is now all over the Astrobot games, both Rescue Mission and Playroom. I wrote this track, which ended up being the music on the credits for Astrobot Rescue Mission. And so, yeah, and that track was called Happy Ever After. But that was basically a reject. So
another reject.
Yeah, it was a bit of music that I'd written, which, you know, was like, it's good, but it doesn't quite fit. And it was a bit too, like, you know, maybe a bit too kiddie and childlike. It's just too fun. It's just like too naive. And they were just like, it doesn't really work. So we shelved it. But then when we came to the credits, it's like credits, you know, really suit having that kind of uplifting, joyous feeling at the end. And also most people just skip it, so it really doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So I was like, hey, how about this track? And they were like, yeah, all right, I suppose that works. And exact same thing happened on Playroom. I was actually trying to write another bit of music rather than reuse Follow Me Into the Storm. I was like, I think I can have another crack at that. Like, we don't need to reuse this music. Let me try something new. And wrote Uplifting Little Number. And they were like, yeah, nope. And actually, I think you can hear some similarities in the track there in terms of, I don't know, like there'll be some rhythmic element or something where I've clearly just taken Follow Me Into the Storm because that track worked and they were using it in the game, like, this works great. And I was like, yeah, it does work, but let's just, you know, it's a new game, let's try something new. And this is what I came up with. And yeah, it didn't quite work, although it's hard to know really if I don't think it was like a terrible match for the level. I think it's probably largely just that the team really loved Follow Me Into the Storm, and we're just, you know, it's that it's almost like it's a bit weird because it's temp track, but it's my music. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. But yeah, I couldn't create something better than that, I guess, because they loved it so much. And here we are, it's the credits, and rather than just have I'm Astrobot play for like 5 minutes or whatever,
Yeah.
I was like, hey, how about this track? And they're like, yeah, that kind of works. So yeah, it's just the same things happened on both games. And it's interesting that it's like the same kind of vibe that I've tried to create and failed because it's like too happy. So yeah, it's weird. There's like a relationship there between both of those tracks, even though it's indirect. So it's kind of cool. So if I ever get the opportunity to work in another Astrobot game, I'll need to try and see if I can find a way to manufacture the same lineage for whatever credits music. It's become like a cross to bear now, which
Yeah, exactly.
It's been mad just to be wrapped up in the launch of PlayStation 5 insofar as, because it's pre-installed, you know, there's just like, I think they announced on one of Sony's earnings calls, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that the number of PlayStation 5s that have sold, and I can't remember what the number was, it was like, 10 million or whatever it is. And yeah, it's the fastest selling Sony console of all time now. So,
Whoa.
That's great. But it just means that no one knows what the final sales of PlayStation 5 will be. But, if it's anything like PlayStation 4, then it's going to be over 100 million consoles.
Amazing.
So and not everyone who buys one's going to play Astro's Playroom, but probably the majority of people will. So it's really the only time in my career where I will work on something that, before I even wrote a note, I knew that there were going to be tens of millions of people listening to the music, which was kind of weird and a bit daunting. So you just had to actually just kind of just ignore that and just get on with trying to make the best thing you could to support the project. But the upside of it, now that it's out and it's been really well received, is that there's just a constant stream of new people checking the game out and listening to the music. And, and some of them like it enough to want to then listen to the soundtrack. And it's been mad. There's just, I get little messages every now and again from people saying, oh, really love this music, and it's just really, really sweet. And to think that's just going to continue over the next, 5 to 10 years, however long the lifetime of PlayStation 5 is kind of mad. As proud as I am of the music, the star of the show is the experience, and they've created something really special, which is a great showcase for PlayStation 5 and the DualSense controller. And just to be part of that has been, such a privilege. I've just, it's kind of ridiculous that it's obviously it's not really anything to do with me. It's because of the team of Sobeys relationship with Sony, particularly the hardware people, where they like commissioned them to make this game. But it just so happens that I did their last game and we've got a relationship. So I got this amazing opportunity to write music pre-installed on a console, which just like, doesn't matter who you are, that doesn't happen. Like statistically, that's not going to happen for like Austin Wintory. Do you know what I mean? It's like
I do.
It shouldn't happen to me either, but it just so happened to be the person who got that call. And it's nuts. And so it's just been a great experience from the development through to the release. And yeah, it'd be cool to see where Astro's Playroom is in people's thoughts and memories in another decade.
I mentioned earlier that your music always makes me happy and it makes me smile. And I think that's hard to make people smile with music.
Yeah, well, it's certainly hard to to come up with that stuff during a pandemic.
Yeah.
When I was doing press for the for the soundtrack and stuff, there was a lot of the questions I would get would be like, oh, how was it, during the pandemic? And the reality is that, I'm a freelancer, I work from home, so there wasn't any like big impact on me in terms of my job or how I do it or whatever. Like, I'm already remote and working with people, on the other side of the world and whatever. I'm used to that, so it's fine. But the psychological and emotional context of writing this uplifting music when like everything's just so weird was definitely challenging. Like that was hard to do. I'd been working on the project for, I don't know, a few months at that point. Okay. And so, we'd already got I'd written the GPU jungle track and like got a lot of the early sort of defining tracks done, and so like a lot of the that, which is like that's the hardest part in any project, is establishing the tone and making sure that it works and that the team are happy and that you're happy and and so I'd broken the back of the work, but then it probably just meant that things were a bit slower for me. It was a bit more. It was just harder work. It was a bit more like wading through treacle kind of feeling going on. But it was kind of fine because on the upside, if the deadline for the project had been soon after that, it would have been bad. But fortunately, it was I don't think I finished working on it until I can't even remember. But it was like after the summer of 2020. Wow. So I had 9 months or whatever to work on it, and it all worked out. But being positive when you're not is tricky. But it's also a kind of like an antidote in some ways, because it's like it forces you to get into you have to get into that mindset. So although you kind of have to just get into that and psych yourself up to feel that's also sort of useful.
Well, Kenny, it's just such a fun soundtrack again, as always. And,
thank you.
What else? I mean, I know you can find it in all the places. You can iTunes it, you can Spotify it, you can all those things.
Yeah, it got I mean, I think largely because it had such a positive reaction from people. I should say it, I hadn't finished working on the OST release until the beginning of this year, because I relocated from the southeast of England back to Scotland with my family and didn't have time to get it done in time for the launch of PlayStation 5, which bit of a missed opportunity, but some things in life are more important. So I got all that other stuff done and then had moved, and I was living in temporary accommodation and trying to get the soundtrack work done, and it was that was way more challenging than the process of writing music for the game. It was just, with my studio in bits. There was some original stuff had to be done. There was no ending for I'm Your GPU, because the track just loops in the game. And I didn't, I try when I'm writing music for a game to work on the album, think about those things when I'm doing it. But, there wasn't time. And so I had to I knew that I needed to record the last little few bass notes. So I made sure, even though most of my stuff was in storage at that point, that I had my bass guitar, so I could do that. And so that's like recorded in a different country than the rest of it. Yeah, because of the key I'd written it in, I like detuned the bottom string on the bass guitar to be able to hit that final note. So now that I've said that, anyone listening to it, any bass player probably heard it was like, what? You what? That's not possible. Because I don't know. I mean, it's not. It's a 4-string bass, so it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't even know if 5-string basses go higher or lower. I'm totally ignorant on that front. But
that's a great question.
I just detuned it.
Amazing.
Sorry, bass players. Sorry. Fortunately, the nice thing that happened was that because it had a really strong reaction at the launch of PlayStation 5, Sony really got behind the soundtrack release, and so it was put out by Sony Music on one of their labels. Nice. I think Sony Masterworks. So that was cool because that's why it's got a super wide release and it's on all the all the different services, is because it was done properly.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
And that was also nice. It was nice to be part of that process as well.
Thanks for listening to Level with Emily Reese. You can learn more about Kenny Young at patreon.com/level. You'll see a playlist there too. I'm Emily Reese. Sam Keenan is our producer. Say hi, Sam.
Hello.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Level with Emily and learn more about us at levelwithemily.com, made possible by Adam Selvage at Tiki Web Services and composer Brad Gentle. Level with Emily Reese is a production of June Media, Inc.